Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, and we will start with the city of Konstantinivka, where we have one of the most important updates of the previous 12 hours. As you can see, the city of Konstantinivka has a lot of flags, mainly through the southern, southwestern, and the western parts of the city. Dozens of flags, as you can see. Every single flag was geolocated. We have flags, and we have the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation that was published yesterday in the evening. Yesterday, the Russians stated that in the city of Konstantinivka, assault units of the southern group of forces are engaged in street fighting. Russian troops have fully established control over the eastern parts of the city and have reached its northern outskirts. Furthermore, in the southwestern part of the city and on the territory of the Konstantinovsky Metallurg plant, the Russians continue fighting with the encircled Ukrainians. So once again, according to this report, and this is the funniest thing of this report and the funniest mistake that was made by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation probably since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians during this report, official report, stated that they managed to establish complete control over the eastern parts of the city. And this is exactly the eastern parts of the city, but at the same time and several hours later, the Russians published a video with dozens of flags that were raised mainly through the western, southwestern, and the southern parts of the city of Konstantinivka, which means that the Russians, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, made a mistake when they were calling the eastern part of the city as western part and the western part as the eastern part. So a funny mistake made by Russians, but anyway, even despite this mistake, we see that indeed the Russians during the previous days, months, managed to improve their position significantly through the city of Konstantinivka, and the Konstantinovka citadel and the most fortified territory was indeed taken by Russians under complete control. And as you can see, dozens of flags were raised through the city, and almost every single flag in this video was geolocated. As you can see, according to this video, the flags were raised in the southern parts, in the southwestern parts, in the western parts of the city, and probably in the northern parts of the western parts of the city. And based on this video, we have adjustments on the map. So this is the situation by the end of the 11th of June of 2026, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 12th of June of 2026. Once again, the Russians made a mistake when they called the eastern parts of the western parts of the city as the eastern part. And another important detail of the report, that the Russians said that there are very heavy clashes through the western parts of the city of Konstantinivka on the territory of the Konstantinovsky metal factory. So the Russians were talking about this facility, but even according to this map, we see that this facility is located probably in the central part of the city, or when talking about the river of Krivoy Tarets, this plant is located to the east of the river, so which means that the plant is located on the eastern part but not on the western part of the settlement. So a funny mistake that was made by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and now we see that indeed, according to this report, the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine through the city of Konstantinivka have collapsed completely. The Russians right now are focused on two things. The first thing is that the Russians continue fighting for this part of the settlement because the Ukrainians were encircled in this area. And you know that another important detail about the situation with these encircled Ukrainian forces, the Russians, according to information we have, haven't proposed or haven't suggested the Ukrainians to surrender. At least we haven't received anything on this matter. You know that usually the Russians, when they encircle these or that positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, usually they propose the Ukrainians to surrender or to lay down their arms. But since the beginning of the battle for the city of Konstantinovka, we haven't received anything on this matter, which means that the Russians, probably even if they made this proposal, probably the Ukrainians from this pocket rejected this idea and decided to fight till the end. So this is their choice, and obviously the Russians will finish the battle for this territory. Another important detail about the battle for the city of Konstantinovka is that the Russians stated that currently the street fightings are taking place also through the Novoselovka micro-district, which is already the northwestern parts of the city and probably the northern parts of the settlement of Konstantinovka. We believe that the days are numbered for the city, for defenses of for the city of Konstantinovka, and probably within the next 2 weeks the battle for the city will be finished, and then the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the direction of the small settlement by the name of Alexeevka-Drushkovka. Probably with the complete collapse of the city of Konstantinovka, we may receive additional updates about the situation in the city of Liman itself. We will also expect that in coming days we will receive something similar that we have just discussed during the southwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. We're talking about video with dozens of flags of the armored force of the Russian Federation. We believe that something similar in coming days we will see through the settlement of Liman. And with the fall of the cities of both the city of Liman and Konstantinovka, the battle for the Druzhkovka-Slaviansk agglomeration begins. Now let's move further and let's discuss the second important update of the previous 12 hours, and we will discuss the situation in the Crimean front line. I would like to remind you that once again these days the Ukrainians are bombing and attacking the bridges and roads through the northern parts of Crimea. Between the 7th and the 10th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians dealt damage to bridges and logistics of Russians through these lines. And yesterday we discussed that the Ukrainians also attacked several bridges around the settlement of Armyansk, but without proofs. And this evening, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the Ukrainians were attacking the bridges in the area of Armyansk. According to this video, very difficult to understand whether indeed the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage to this bridge, or they just managed to damage it, or nothing, or neither. So very difficult to say, but we have a video, we have proofs that indeed the Ukrainians were attacking this bridge. Most likely the Russians restricted access to this area due to a threat from the drones of the armored force Ukraine. Now the Russians are trying to improve their positions through this territory with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to destroy these bridges, or not to allow the Ukrainians to block Crimea completely. Another important thing is the situation that is currently taking place to the west of Crimea and to the west of Kherson. This morning, somewhere around at 11 a.m. of the 12th of June of 2026, the Russians launched several missiles in the direction of the Zatoka bridge. The Russians began bombing and attacking this territory with the purpose to destroy the Zatoka bridge completely. So this is the bridge, and the sources reported that the Russians used two missiles launched by Su-34, Su-35 over the western Black Sea. There were at least two Su-34s, two Su-35s, and one Su-30 involved in this operation. The missiles disappeared at some point. The missiles disappeared over the sea, but later we received the report that an explosion was heard in Zatoka, Odessa Oblast. Probably the Russians impacted the bridge again. So as we can see, the Russians most likely are tasked to destroy the Zatoka bridge completely. The Russians began bombing and attacking the settlement of Zatoka somewhere between the 7th and 8th or 9th of June of 2026. During the previous 5 days, the Russians have attacked the Zatoka bridge probably 3 or 4 times, in total using up to 10 missiles and bombs altogether, which means that the Russians, due to the situation with the northern Crimean logistic lines, the Russians are tasked to destroy the Zatoka bridge completely and to cut the southwestern parts of Ukraine from the mainland, and to cut Romania and NATO countries and supplying support from the NATO countries using the territory of the southwestern parts of the Odessa region. But despite the fact that the Russians have already used almost a dozen of missiles to attack the Zatoka bridge, we still believe that the Russians haven't managed to deal a critical damage to this construction, but it's just a matter of time. If the Russians continue, obviously, within a month of explosions and within a month of attacks in the direction of the Zatoka bridge, the Russians most likely would be able to deal a critical damage, or even to destroy it, or at least to not allow the Ukrainians to use this railway bridge for the logistic purposes.
Nye Bluey Fuzzies.
Pris!
Giv mig den telefon. Samlebare bløde figurer til Bluey-fans. Alle figurerne fra dine yndlingsepisoder. De er fuzzy, kan stables og er samleobjekter. Med sjældne designs, samlekort og episodesæt. Find de nye Bluey Fuzzies der, hvor du køber legetøj.
Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation with the massive attack. As you may know, today the Russians celebrate the Russian Day. So that is why it was expected that during the Russian Day the Ukrainians would attack the territory of Russia using hundreds of drones. And yesterday in the evening, pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see the approximate routes of the Ukrainian drones flying deep inside of the territory of Russia. And yesterday pro-Ukrainian sources reported that during the overnight attack there were at least 250 drones involved in that operation. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that during the night they destroyed 231 drones of the armed forces of Ukraine over the territory of Russia. But despite the fact that almost every single drone, almost every single Ukraine's drone was destroyed by Russians, during the morning we received lots of updates that lots of buildings and facilities in the central part of Russia were damaged or even destroyed. During the night, we received a video from the settlement of Tolyatti, and the sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked the Tolyatti chemical plant, so this one. And during the night, we received lots of videos on this matter. In this video, we can see a fire that's black smoke that was rising over the Tolyatti chemical plant right after the Ukrainians attacked this territory with a drone. In this video, we can see drones flying over the Tolyatti and how the Russians were trying to destroy them with air defense systems. In these videos, we can see how the Ukrainian drones were flying over the settlement trying to get the Tolyatti chemical plant. In this video, we can see more fires and more explosions that were recorded. So it seems that as a result of attack, the Tolyatti chemical plant was damaged, not destroyed, damaged. Probably this will cause some problems to production and to capacity and capabilities of this facility. Another important territory that was attacked by the Ukrainians is the settlement of Nizhnekamsk, more precisely the Nizhnekamsk oil refinery. During the night, we also received lots of videos on this matter. The Ukrainians attacked the Nizhnekamsk oil refinery, and it seems that as a result of attack, this oil refinery was damaged. We can see a fire broke out right after the Ukrainians attacked the territory, which means that the oil refinery was damaged. Can't say for sure whether the oil refinery received critical damage, probably not, but obviously this is not something that the Russians and the population of Russia wanted to see during the Russian Day, during this holiday that the Russians celebrate through the entire territory of the Russian Federation. And another important territory that was attacked by the Ukrainians is the city of Simferopol, Crimea. As for this territory, this attack was recorded through the night, and the sources reported that the Ukrainians were attacking the Crimean power station. So as you can see, the Ukrainians continue attacking logistics, the Ukrainians continue power stations and energy infrastructure of this territory, and a person who is responsible for the Crimean, let's say, drone operation stated that they will isolate Crimea in the near future. They will create conditions that will greatly complicate the presence of any military personnel or defense industry workers in Crimea. And so this is the statement of Ukrainians, which means that they're planning to continue all these attacks and they will not stop until they get results. Meanwhile, the Russians continue attacking the territory of Ukraine with drones and missiles from their side. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that 117 drones were used by Russia to attack the territory of Ukraine, and explosions were recorded through different parts of the settlement. Explosions were recorded in the city of Kiev. The sources reported that as a result of attack, the Russians destroyed an oil base on the territory of the Kiev agglomeration. Probably the Ukrainians were using this oil base or fuel tanks to supply Kiev with fuel, but now they will not be able to do this. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the northern parts of Ukraine, the city of Chernihiv, Oblast. Once again, the Russians attacked the city of Kharkiv. Lots of videos were published about this situation as well. And the Russians were attacking the M30 road between the city of Pavlograd and the line of combat contact. The Russians continue attacking the logistics in the city with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces along the line of combat contact. So the summer military operation, the summer offensive operations from both the Russians and the Ukrainians are intensifying, and we will see more. Another important thing is that the Russians also improved their positions through the Kharkiv direction during the previous night. This information was reported by several pro-Russian sources, and according to these changes, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the big forest along the border between Russia and Ukraine. Just yesterday we received the report that the Russians have captured the settlement of Agrimovka, and today we received the report that the Russians improved their positions further, and currently the distance between edge positions along the river of Volcha between Russian troops is less than 12 kilometers, which means that in coming days the Russians will finish the battle for the Volcha river, and then the group of forces north will continue offensive operation towards the